So welcome back to another session of Just Me. And today we're joined by the fabulous Dean Burnett. And I mean fabulous Dean Burnett because he does some awesome stuff. But I will ask him to introduce himself and tell us what he does. So Dean, over to you. What do you do?
Oh, okay, I'm various things. I'm a doctor of neuroscience by training. I got a PhD in behavioral neuroscience from Cardiff University. Spent the best part of 7 years after that as a psychiatry lecturer, lecturing on about mental health and how it works in the brain and the science of it and the management and diagnostics and etc. etc. But
Wow.
and during like the early 2000s, I dabbled in stand-up comedy for many years, and that's only as a hobby. I was never a professional actor or anything, but that got me into writing, and I ended up sort of out of sidelining writing, trying to write about science humorously, and ended up doing that for the Guardian news, the website, but occasionally got printed in the paper. And as a result of that, I got approached by a literary agent and said, "You ever thought of writing a book?" And until that point, I hadn't really. And I did, and that seems to have taken off. And I'm basically a full-time author these days. I'm currently finished off the edits of my fifth book, which will be out in January, and got a sixth one lined up, and various antics around that, talks, appearances, contributions to things like podcasts. And here we are.
I mean, I know that you told me previously about the science story in your school. So can you tell people just how you sort of arrived at the world of science and neuroscience?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like I say, when I was a kid, there was no there was no what do you call it? I wasn't even aware of psychology as a science, really, and especially not psychiatry.
Right.
That just wasn't on the radar at all. It's like I grew up in the Garrow Valley, Pontycama, the village in the Garrow, South Wales mining community. Very much one of the more remote, isolated ones because there's no through road. There's actually a book just published called The Golden Valley, all about my hometown, which I recommend to anyone reading it. It's a photo book, so there's lots of beautiful scenery there, but also it shows like the entropy, the decay of it all. And I sort
Wow.
of was born just as that kicked in because I was like 3 years old when the mine got shut down, and
Wow.
saw the last train leaving, and so I grew up in a community on the decline, for want of a better description. But yeah, but it was a very remote, isolated, working class area. Things like psychology and mental health just were not part of the discussion. And I
Wow.
grew up in a pub in the valley, one of the most successful ones, but still, it's when you've got a community of mostly coal miners who suddenly have their livelihoods taken away, they'll turn to drink a lot. So that's it's a bittersweet success, I guess. And so I grew up in that sort of environment, seeing that around us, and it was, in hindsight, it was very informative. But I was,
Mm.
but I was always like an anomaly. I was like my parents had me when they were 21. And I was very young parents, and but it's just sort of South Wales mining community, and I was the community itself, and my family particularly, are very outgoing, let's just say extroverted in many ways. Like they're all singing, all dancing, sport, drinking, carousing, and stuff, and it's part of the Burnett lineage. It seems they're very large than life characters, and I never was. I was a very shy, retiring child, look very bookish. And looking back, I wonder if it's because when I was born, it was just me and my parents in a tiny little terraced house in one of the villages, so
Mm.
quite a sort of quiet environment. So, there's lots of family around, but a very straightforward existence. But then when I was like two, they moved us into this pub, and my life things yeah, changed drastically at a very formative age when I'm suddenly surrounded by people, noise, strangers, crowds, and I think I must have retreated into myself a bit as a result of that. And that sort of had lasting impact at a very when I was at a very key stage of development. So I was always like quiet and shy and like reading and didn't go out and didn't want to sing or dance or put myself out there.
Wow.
And eventually I realized, well, no one else is like this. Why am I like this and nobody else is?
Mm.
Because I was so preferred to read and things, I ended up getting a taste for sci-fi and things like that. And I sort of became curious as to why I was different. Because kids wonder like, why don't I blend in?
Yes.
Why can't I get on with sport? I mean, I have I I'm sort of getting into more in sport now because my 10-year-old son is a massive football enthusiast. Plays every chance he gets, and I'm sort of embracing the world of sport a bit more.
Mm.
And but as a kid, I think I was put off because I was again wasn't very active. I was chunky child, so therefore in the school rugby team I was made prop forward. So I right in the mix in the rugby games, and like I was that persisted for like 7 years all through school, and at no point did anyone ever tell me how to play rugby. It was just assumed that I would know because I'm from where I'm from. So I just got to
Mm.
say, right, you go there, get in this massive scrum with all the other blokes, and you just get stamped on, and run around until you get the ball, and then and then enjoy that, and then come back and do it next week. Because this again, so it really put me off. So I'm looking, I've just been conscious of why I'm different about things. So I end up sort of making the rudimentary leap, thinking it must be I must have a different brain to everyone else. Like I knew your brain is what makes you what you are. And I said, sort of like became a bit curious about that. I said, why am I different? What's going on there? And it
Wow.
gave me sort of like interest in that area. And I became more of a science enthusiast generally because I like sci-fi, and it was something that appealed to me. And I liked the order and structure of things. And I think I might have mentioned in our previous chat, but it was
Mm.
quite telling that when I did my A levels in my school, it was a school like over 1,000 students, and um, if you added up like the A level chemistry, physics, and biology class when I was doing them, you only got 7 students out of 1,000, and 3 of them were me because I was the only one
Wow.
doing all the sciences. So I was
Mm.
technically half my school's science output, which obviously was an interesting situation to be in with the teachers being concerned. But again, they told me I should go to university, and again, it wasn't I did not know what that was at that time. So I looked into it. It's like, so it's more school, but you're in charge. It's, oh, okay, I can do that. That sounds good. And I kind of cast around for a few places, and Cardiff was doing a neuroscience program, and that's sort of the brain stuff. That would help me explain what's going
Wow.
on here. And yeah, so I went there, and I just like showed us all the labs and the students' union, showed us the um, I know, took us into one of the professors just pulled a brain out of a bucket, and I was like, "Yep, sold. This is the sort of place where you can do that. That's what I want.
That's for me.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want." And yeah, it became that just became my interest. I applied, got the rest necessary grades, and joined the course. And that's sort of I haven't looked back since really. And I mean, the
Wow.
mental health side is also it, my interest gravitated that direction because it became part of the general discussion anyway. But
Mm.
both, there's also the fact that I grew up in a pub and saw people with, in hindsight, blatant mental health issues. Alcoholism,
Mm.
depression, anxiety, stress, anger issues, like all these things which I
Mm.
thought were normal, but at the time didn't have the vocabulary for. I now do, and I've
Brilliant.
likened it to someone sort of being lost in the jungle as a child and coming back to civilization as like a 18-year-old, joining university and then doing a zoology course and then finding out, well,
Mm.
that's a parrot. That's what that's called. Or that's a,
Wow.
that's a tapir. I know what that's called now. And, just, I'm very familiar with these things, but I didn't know how everyone else viewed them. But also, again, to take it a more sort of dark uh, aspect, I'm from Bridgend. That's where the Garibaldi is. And that's, in the early 2000s, we had the Bridgend
Yeah.
suicide incidents where, there's a rash of suicides in Bridgend amongst young people. And the way that was
Mm.
covered, everyone in the community is just still massively appalled and disgusted by the media sensationalism of it, and that led to a lot of guidelines and restrictions on reporting suicide. But it was treated as big. Oh, look at this, creepy people killing themselves.
Yeah.
Whoa, and these were my family, my community, and
Yeah.
so like every chance I get now, I try and uh, any presence I have in the media, I try to say, look, that's not how anything works. And it was, there was definitely a classist element to it. It's, the London-centric media people who are all
Mm.
middle-class Oxford graduates saying, "Oh, look, this working-class community is just gone mad. Isn't that cool?" It's very much voyeurism of it, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so that's that provides a constant motivator to combat that whenever I can, because I've sort of managed to slip through the gaps of the society and ended up in this weirdly high profile position. So yes, that's a
Very
general
cool.
gist and explanation of where I've come from.
I mean, one question. So, what have you learnt along the way about yourself and about the world in general?
Um, I'm a lot more. Let's see, empathetic is probably too strong a word, but I am. But I try to be, and I think a lot of stuff comes down to people, how people work, and how they function at the most, at the basic
Mm.
psychological level. Because I think when people think of science, it's usually physics and chemistry and these are
Yeah.
the proper sciences. Astronomy gets a lot of attention because it, how does the universe work, and and a lot of very pretty pictures come out of astronomy, which makes it easy to sell.
Mm.
But neuroscience is sort of catch up a bit because we have scanning technology now, and it applies to pretty much literally everything. But there's this idea that things like psychology and sociology are lesser sciences, that are a bit more sort of wishy-washy or soft sciences. I think some people call them that. I think there are a lot of psychologists who have physics envy, it's called, where come up they try to come up with equations to explain human behavior, just like you'd have equations to to explain the strength of gravity of a certain mass. And I'm like, I can see what you're doing, but you can't do that. People do not behave consistently and in
Mhm.
any way, shape, or form. But these sciences, they affect our entire reality. Our world is one built by people, and how they work, and what the instincts they have, their reactions they have, and there's so much which these fields have uncovered. Things like group polarization effects and the just world. Things make more sense, I think. How people behave, how they act, and you can see things coming a lot easier if you take these things into account. I guess when you can't model how a specific person will behave
Mm.
because that's we're just too complex. We're not just a bunch of calculations strung together. But
Mm.
there's a lot more which can be very informative in these these so-called soft sciences. And yeah, I think I've learned to be more tolerant, I guess, because I remember being a teenager and sort of joining in things like the skeptic communities and or early 20s and stuff like that. But suddenly becoming like really invested in your community, and you see it all the time, especially online now. It's far more palpable because you can just see it happening in real time. But it's always been a thing. I mean, like I mentioned sport, like football fans, football
Mm.
supporters, they've always been incredibly tribal and incredibly aggressive to
Mm.
anyone who rivals their tribe. That's
Mm.
what sport is essentially. It's competitive. It's
Mm.
sticking to your community, supporting them to the hilt against all logical reason. Because there's no, if you're a Man U fan in the '90s, you were very much riding high in the football world, but now
Mm.
you're not so much. So like
Mm.
it's very much a different ask, but you still get the fans who are very dedicated to the team, even though the team doesn't even know they exist half the time. They just know they're one of those numbers. And but it can be anything. Like Star Wars fandoms. It seems to be very aggressive community lately, based on an enthusiasm for something which, for the best of the world, does not exist. It cannot exist,
Mm.
and is the creation of a few people's imaginations. And people see it as a life or death thing. And
Mm.
these things will happen when you understand how groups work together, how people are so social, so communal, so tribal. And I've been very wary since of falling in that trap myself. And I did several times. In the skeptic community, we used to sort of poke a lot of fun at anyone who believed in alternative medicine or spiritual stuff. And when you're part of the comedy scene, you become sort of, especially a scene like that, which is very, um, you know, you have to have a certain amount of ego to want to do comedy in the first place, or at least something which pushes you out there. And you do feel like you have something worth sharing with the world, what you want to say. And but when it's like everyone's competing for the same gig, you will have polarization. You will have
Mm.
a tendency to be competitive and to see other people as rivals. So it gets very cliquey, very snidey,
Mm.
very fast, and very competitive. So I've always been very wary of that. When I get too engrossed in something now, or I feel I'm getting too engrossed, I will step back, thinking that's not going to do me or anyone else any good if I get too caught up in something. So I'm always constantly checking myself now because I don't want to fall in that into that sort of trap again, because you end up sort of
Mm.
behaving in ways which aren't logical, aren't rational, and which don't help. You just sort of preach into the choir, saying, "Look at me, look how good I am at insulting this person. You guys all like me, yeah?" And that's 90% of Twitter. I know that, but it's but I'm very wary of propagating that. It's sort of why I don't really have much enthusiasm for the concept of role models or having heroes or idols, because although I get you can have inspiring people who inspire you to do better and just to show you an example of how and what you can achieve. That's all great, but you know when it comes to hero worship, I think that's very much you end up in that place very quickly, especially because any individual human is going to be flawed because we are. That's just simply how it is. So when you
Mm,
have hero worship someone like very recently the Michael Jackson situation, people still love the
mm,
man. People still think he's an absolute icon, and should any criticism of him cannot be tolerated, despite
mm,
all the things which seem quite palpable that he should be criticized for. And yeah, so I'm again, that's why I'm always a bit uncomfortable with the whole thing of hero worship or role models. Like, you shouldn't want to be like someone, and you shouldn't sort of like prioritize them above all else. You can follow their example. You can sort of use them as a benchmark to what can be achieved. But when you dedicate yourself to someone, that I think is it's going to be asking for trouble more often than not. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but in a roundabout way, I think I've said some stuff. That's probably what's
it
important.
did. Well, it's quite interesting actually, because my next question is, so what and who has helped you along the way, which is quite fitting because of what you just said there about kind of hero worship.
Hmm.
But have you? But has there been anyone
Oh yeah,
that
loads of
kind of
people. Like, I'm very again, some of the heroes. I'm also very, very, perhaps contrastingly, very deeply skeptical of any claims of being a
Mm,
self-made man, or no one helped me. Everyone helped you. We're a social species. I'll let
mm,
anyone who says I did it all by myself, no one helped me, I'm completely self-sufficient and I achieved everything on my own. If you were abandoned in the woods as a child, like a 2-year-old, taught yourself English and built and sewed yourself a suit out of leaves, and then walked out and got a job, then yeah, fair enough. I'll give you that. Yeah, okay, you are clearly a self-made individual. But if you've been taught in a school, if your parents looked after you, then no, you're not. You just simply aren't. We aren't. That's not how our world works. We are interconnected. Everyone helps everyone just because that's how societies work. And the idea that that's some sort of hindrance just completely ignores how we work as a species. But
brilliant.
so with that in mind, like, I mean, like, I had teachers who sort of just cajoled me and guided me and helped me sort of realize I could do this, and those who said, like, you can do better than you are, and provided a good example like that. I mean, my parents are always supportive. They didn't know what I was doing because like neither of them even did A levels. I went straight to like technical college and got relevant qualifications there. So once I was doing science, like, I was in any shape or form, I was beyond the remit of my family's knowledge, but they never condemned me or said I was doing anything wrong. So they've always supported me all the way in that respect. My professors in PhD time, pardon me, they were very sympathetic to my shortcomings and helped me get through my PhD in dissertation, because I came to the
Brilliant.
postgraduate world very naive, didn't quite know how it worked. I mean, I felt I could do it, but most of the people I was working alongside, like, no disrespect to them, they were from families and backgrounds where it was understood how this all worked, and I was
Mm,
figuring out as I went along. Um, People in the comedy and performing world, obviously Robert Ince is a big influence because he's helped me out at the very early stages, purely because of his own generosity.
brilliant.
Someone in terms of style and approach, I always reference Ian Boldsworth, who's a comedian. Used to be known as Ray Peacock, but he's Ian now. He's on Patreon and stuff, and we're friends now. But he's he introduced me to the concept of blogging and how it could work, how it could be good, and
Wow.
forging your own path, being creative, and putting your own thing out there, and not not conforming to what's demanded of you by the wider industry and stuff. So yeah, he's been a big influence on my existence. Like, I don't think he meant to. I think it's just someone I sort of just latched onto as. So yes, this guy knows how things work, and yeah, but there's plenty of people like that, and plenty of colleagues and co-workers and people, like, far too many now to name. But yeah, it's not something I would ever deny. I am the result of so many people influencing my life. I mean, that's not including my own wife, who is obviously, we've been together now longer than we haven't in terms of our lifespans, and so she's been a
Mm,
massive influence on just who I am, and she's shaped me. I know, vice versa. And obviously, her personality is a big chunk of what I've done now, what I've said. So
mm,
yeah, so no,
mm,
there are countless people who have got me to where I am, where I would have never deny that, and I've always been grateful for. But again, I can
mm,
probably people can probably say the same about me as well. Like, without me, they wouldn't be where they are. Again, not something I meant to do. Just that that's just how it's happened.
mm,
So
mm.
yes, it's a complex web we all weave.
It's brilliant. So what keeps you going when times get tough? Because times do get tough, don't they? I mean, regardless of who you are and
Hmm.
where your position is in life.
Yeah, it's I've learned that very recently. Like, I've been very public about it, but my father contracted COVID at the very start of the pandemic and
Mm,
passed away from it, and I had to endure the fallout the grief and the emotional turmoil in isolation because of lockdown. So you can imagine what the current news regarding our glorious leaders is having on having on my mental state. Um,
Mm.
yeah, it's a tricky one because it really does depend on what it is that's causing the hard time. I mean, I've been quite vocal, say in the past, or any opportunity I get about the risks and dangers of the whole what we've sort of labeled toxic positivity thing. Just like the idea that you should be happy all the time. If you're not, there's something wrong. And also this notion that being happy is just a choice, isn't it? You can choose to have a good attitude, like put a positive spin on everything. And there's so much about that which is potentially damaging. Like the idea that you should uh, be, or you should suppress or avoid or ignore negative
Mm.
emotions. And that's
Mm.
genuinely unhelpful in terms of how our brains work. We are very emotional creatures, but we have a whole suite of emotional responses. And to only allow yourself the positive ones, that logically requires emotional suppression, which means that those parts of your brain which deal with that emotion don't get used. And when your part of your brain doesn't get used, it tends to atrophy because that's just the brain's a very demanding organ, and what doesn't get used gets shunted to one side or like deprioritized, and things are allocated elsewhere. So your ability to handle these emotions declines. And that's because of the way
Mm.
our brains work, the parts of the brain which process emotional experiences, which help us come to terms with them, integrate them into our psyche and our state of being, those are the same parts which create the emotion. So we can't sort of process emotion without experiencing it, which is like it's been an interesting thing I've recently uncovered, that why we like listening to sad music, for example, or
Mm.
scary films, or so angry music. These are things which ostensibly cause a negative emotional reaction. So we don't want to be sad. Why would we like to be sad? But there are plenty of entertainment and artworks which
Mm.
deliberately cause people the feeling of sadness. So logically, we shouldn't enjoy that sort of thing, but we do. They're really, really popular misery memoirs and stuff like that. And so, like, what's that about? And I think the main theory now is because it allows our brains to experience the sensation of sadness, but in a safe and controlled way.
Brilliant.
So it's almost like giving our brain a workout. It's like, oh, good. Like I try to avoid sadness, but this isn't my sadness. This is vicarious sadness, and I can just put this book down. I can just turn this film off if I want to. So it's like it's almost like a vaccination. Really, it's like giving your brain the ability to experience these negative
Mm.
emotions, which we will experience at some point because life is like that. Bad things happen,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
think that's the sort of main message I try to get across. In that, yes, you will go through bad times, and you will feel negative emotions about them, but that's good. It's not good. It won't be fun. You won't experience. It won't be a
Mm.
great laugh to go through that. But it's good. The fact that your brain is doing that means your brain is working as it should. And it's important not to
Brilliant.
suppress the negative emotions if you can. It's
Brilliant.
sometimes you have to because the demands of life mean you don't have a choice. I mean, I had to do that. I was racked with grief, but it was a lockdown. I have two small children who depended on me and no one else to take care of them. So I had to power through that. And I
Yeah.
don't think that was a good idea, but it was that or my family falls apart. And so I didn't
Yes.
have a choice in the matter. I'm not sure what harm that's done to me long term. I think I'm okay. I think I have enough resilience to manage that. But long term we'll see, and that's something I'm obviously constantly keeping an eye on. But yeah, so I'd rather not have done that. Normally, when you lose someone, or something like a breakup happens, you experience this powerful sadness, and you usually have people around you or some things in place which allow you to have some downtime, allow you to work through
Mm.
it. People are saying the whole walling on the sofa thing. Yes, it's a cliche, but it's a helpful one because you're currently overwhelmed with
Mm.
emotions. You should take some time out to come to terms with what's happened to you. That's how your brain does this sort of stuff. So denying yourself that, saying no, I must be happy, I must power through, I must soldier on. You're not doing yourself any favors. You're actually causing yourself more harm than good. I mean, I've likened to it in one of my books. So only allowing yourself to be happy, nothing else. It's like going to the gym every day, but only ever work on your left leg.
Yeah.
So after a couple of months, you have a really big left leg, and the rest of your body is all out of shape and disproportionate. And you're falling over and walking in circles, and it's not good. It's really you're doing yourself more harm than help in the long run. So yeah, so like,
Mm.
yes, I don't really have any advice for how to get through bad times and stay positive. But apart from to say you don't have to stay positive. It's fine to accept that bad stuff is happening to you. Denying that is going to cause you more problems in the long run.
That's brilliant. I love that. So, what advice would you give to others, in all that you know in terms of the brain and how we are?
I mean, that's a very broad question. Like, there's loads of stuff I could add in terms of that. I guess this. I think we should. I think, if anything, the basis of my first book and subsequent career was trying to challenge this idea that the brain is unknowable and sort of awe-inspiring and so complex that we can't even begin to comprehend it. I mean, there's plenty of it which does fall under that under that sort of a description. We don't know how it does what it does much of the time. There's plenty that we don't understand about the function of the brain and how it
Mm.
works and how it achieves what it does and what it's capable of. But there's plenty we do understand. There's plenty we have that, okay, that's how that works. That's how this goes there. This
Mm.
bit does that. So we do know plenty about it. It's one of those things like, well, science doesn't have all the answers, yeah, but it does have a lot. So it doesn't mean you can just
Yeah.
discount everything it does. It does know because of a few gaps in the whole understanding. And I sort of like where the book, my first book, where it came from, because as well as thinking I wasn't qualified or allowed to, I was surprised. Like, no, I didn't think I would be able to write a brain book, a mainstream brain book, because all the ones I'd
Mm.
read before, as good as they were, they had this sort of reverence to the brain. It's sort of coming, to speak to me and saying, look at this amazing thing. It's outstanding. Wow, so cool. Look what it can
Mm.
do. And when you've
Mm.
been a neuroscientist for anything up to a week, you can you quickly lose that that reverence for the brain because it just this thing's a massive mess. This is a right pain. It doesn't do anything logically. Well, why is it doing that now? I think the example I've used before. It's like, when you start off doing neuroscience, it's like when you first fall in love with someone. It's all harps and roses, and you're on cloud nine. It's like amazing and brilliant and reverent, and then you move in with them, and that's just like, oh my goodness, this is really happening. It's a dream come true and stuff. And then you live with them for a couple of months, and then slowly but surely, their quirks, their habits, they start to seep in, and you start to sort of like, oh, I really love this person, but they're in the bathroom for 40 minutes every morning, and I'm late for work, and that's really annoying. Like, oh, look, they've emptied the dishwasher, but they've left the knives sticking up again. Oh, we've had words about that, but it's fine, it's fine. It's like, I'm not going to kill them, but I do think about it often, and that's sort of that sort of relationship. It's like, I still appreciate it, but I'm aware that the whole idea that they're perfect is not a thing anymore. And that's what I was with the brain. Is no, this thing's a blooming tangled ball of nonsense most of the time. And they sort of
Wow.
say, well, why don't you write about that then? You know what, I will. And, that was my first book, The Idiot Brain, pointing out how the brain isn't
Mm.
perfect. It does loads of things, quote unquote, wrong or illogically or counterintuitively or just weirdly because it's not been designed by anyone. It's evolved over millions and millions of years based on what was needed necessary at the time, and just kept. It's accumulated as all these evolutionary quirks and ticks and mechanisms which don't necessarily make sense together, but they work, so they'll just stick with it. And that's what we've got. It's it's a very very complex, baffling system, and so much of that uh, affects how we work and who we are. So your
Mm.
brain will constantly be doing weird, random
Mm.
things. You constantly ask yourself, why did I do that? Why on earth did I think that? Why am I thinking this for? And that's a lot of the time it's because that's how we've evolved, and it's not your fault. Nothing wrong with you. I think that's the general thing I tell people. Yeah, all this stuff happens. It's not because there's anything wrong with you. If anything, it means there's everything right with you. That's just how our brains
Mm.
are. They aren't perfect. They do cough up all these random hairballs of cognitive nonsense all the time, and that's just that's just normal behavior for your typical brain. And weird as it is,
Brilliant.
that's what are you going to do about it? But and I think that's helpful personally. I think the idea that our brain is all powerful, all knowing, and beyond our ken isn't a
Mm.
helpful one. I mean, it's cool to think that we're all capable of so much and such power, but that quickly becomes it's almost infallible. So when
Mm.
things go wrong, that's even more terrifying. It's like, a lot of stigma on mental illness, I think, comes from that because people don't like the idea that your
Mm.
brain can go wrong. And it's like, oh
Mm.
my god, like your body going wrong is one thing, that's just injury and infections, but your brain going wrong, well, that's terrifying. That can't happen. But I think it's
Mm.
important to know it can happen, and it does happen on a regular basis. Like almost every 20 seconds, it does something unhelpful or just what? It's inconvenient. And I think we do really well considering that. So I'd like to think we are advanced apes, not fallen angels in that respect. And that's, I think, coming from that perspective, I think it's more healthy and more reassuring. And I think, considering what I got to work with, I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, I'm a functional human being. That's really that's quite an achievement, given all the constant millions of neuroses and quirks and tics and mental loops that my mind's constantly thrown at me. So yeah. So well
Yes,
done, everyone, for having a
lovely.
brain and sticking with it.
Yeah. And what sort of legacy, if you could leave a legacy behind, what might that be?
I mean, it's weird to say, but apparently I have one of sorts already. I mean, I have had countless people now tell me that, like colleagues in academia and stuff, and like I have a friend and who's a head of, well, not head of, but involved in processing applications to Cambridge for medical
Mm.
schools and stuff. And he said, your book comes up as a reference for which inspired people to do this so many times, and so I know I've led to there being more doctors in the world, and
Wow,
I think
brilliant.
there's been like a dozen secondary schools now where my books are required reading for the psychology program. So
Wow,
I know full
brilliant.
well that there are psychologists, doctors, and neuroscientists out there who who are what they are because of me. I've been going at this long enough now, and it's really weird for me to think that. And also kind of terrifying because I know how little incompetent I can be at many things. But yeah, so I know I like to think I've made the world a better place in that respect because there are people in it working to make it better who are doing what they do because of some spark of interest I kicked off in them, and that's nice to
That's
know that,
lovely.
and I hope to keep doing that because the books I put out there. The thing I think people like what I do is that I don't patronize. I really go out my way not to patronize anyone to say, yes, you
Mm,
simple prole, this is how science works. Listen to me, and maybe you'll learn something.
mhm,
It's my default sort of stance whenever I'm writing pretty much anything is to say that, is to assume that whoever's reading this is at least as smart as I am, but they just
mm,
don't know what I know. They don't have the terminology, they don't have the vocabulary, but they can easily understand it. And I think that's really important in any sort of informative writing to adopt that stance. I think because when you start condescending to people, they don't like it. They don't respond well to it, and you're not even doing it
yes.
for the potential reader. You're doing it for people you want to impress. To say, oh yes, yes, I'm also one of those intellectual people, and like, yes, this is how you should talk to the minions of the world. And I've never had any truck with that. I don't think
Yes.
academia and science should be a reserve for the privileged few. I don't think we should we aren't bastions of the font of knowledge, giving sips to everyone who deigns to approach and touch our lapels, and that's I've never had any time for that sort of thing. So I do try to make it as accessible as possible, and I don't like to assume that people are thick or stupid because by by and large they're not. It's just not the case. I think everyone is
Yes.
intelligent in some way, shape, or form. Everyone has knowledge that I don't have. So why should I feel this any different? Why is my knowledge better just because it's more niche? And I think that's an important thing to do. And the next book's all about the experience of losing my father and the emotions and how I got through them. And I think that could
Mm,
feasibly be helpful, be an informative and sort of a useful text for people who end up in similar situations themselves, which will be everyone eventually, unfortunately, because that's how life is. But yeah, so I like to think I've shaped a legacy of sorts already, which is nice that people think that. So if I stop now, at least I've made some good in the world.
Well, I have to say that I've read three of your books, and I absolutely loved them. The thing that I love is I always call it simplexity. Is that you're taking something that's actually very complex, such as the brain, and making it's sort of simple and very easy to understand. And I mean, my favourite of your books is The Happy Brain,
Thank you.
only in that it has a conversation with you about yourself, and I really love that. I really, really do. It's such a and I can see why courses and degrees and stuff say to people that it's almost essential reading because I would very much put it in that category for myself as well. So we often describe things as kind of fizzy pop moments when you get really excited about something. So what sort of fizzy pop moments do you have? I mean, I know that you told me earlier that you've got a beagle that's 9 weeks old called Forest,
Yeah.
which is beautiful. So what other fizzy pop moments do you have?
Lately, I found that I'm having that sort of experience of like, oh yes, 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 this is what I like, this is what I want. I got into I do some listen to podcasts and things, but I don't listen to science podcasts. And probably a lot of people assume I do, but when you spend your working day writing about and investigating scientific things, that's it's like I don't know. I listen to podcasts to unwind, to relax, to not work, and
Mm.
I've really found an enthusiasm for hearing people, people who know stuff, talk about something I don't know about with passion and
Brilliant.
insight. But I find that really, really, that's the strength of podcasts. Like everyone said, it's people having a chat.
Mm.
You feel like you're part of something in a far more intimate and equal way than when it's like
Mm.
a lecture delivered on TV or things like that. And like a friend of mine, this podcast doing very well right now, the Socially Distant Sports Bar. Mike Bubbins, Dennis James, Steph Guerrero, and Mike and Ellis are friends of mine from the comedy scene. But we're still in touch. I see
Brilliant.
Mike quite regularly. He lives on the road, but they are all huge sports fans. And I never, like as I said, I was always averse to sport. I never hated it, but I just had no time for it because negative experiences and no making any real effort to get me into it. But listen to them talk about it with enthusiasm, with passion, with insight, with knowledge and experience. Just genuinely invigorating. I think this is great. This is stuff I don't know about, and I love finding out stuff that I don't know about from informed people, people who care. It's not dry, it's not academic. It's very funny, it's very insightful, and similarly, there's the other podcast, Chart Music, where a lot of middle-aged music journalists go through an episode of Top of the Pops and dissect it down to like the very atoms of okay, what does this song mean? What's the history behind this one? Where does this put it in terms of culture, the wider world around it, the context? And it's just so informative because again, music is another thing I've never really twigged with. I think because there's a lot more music in my life when I moved into that pub. So like sort of, I think at a young age I learned, oh, music means chaos, noise, disruption, change.
Wow.
And again, I don't dislike music. I've never disliked music, but I never had the passion and the insight of it that like most people do. And people have like a favorite album or like, wait, oh, remember you hear that song? Or people go to gigs and they get really into it. And I've never done that because it just doesn't have that effect on me. It's like if music is like wine, like most people I know, they go, oh, my favorite is a Chateau Lafite or a Chenin Blanc
Yeah.
from this region. And I like white. I don't mind red. Rose can take or leave. That's the level of insight I can offer. Like I don't dislike it. I don't disagree with you. I can't get to that level. But to hear people talk about the music, the culture, the implications of it, like where it led to, where it came from. I just love untangling stuff like that. I love being able to sort of find something which seems, it seems like such fluff on the surface, like a random football match from the 1980s between two teams I don't
Mm.
know, or a random song from 1975 before I was born, and to hear that this actually represents so much. I think I love untangling all that complexity from things that you wouldn't expect it. I guess that's because that's a big part of what I've done. Like with the Guardian especially, I'd find a
Mm.
random news story or something kind of like a bit of fluff and try and extrapolate as much science from it as I possibly could. And you'd be surprised how much you could do that, especially with neuroscience. Obviously, if it's human involved, the brain is involved, and therefore it's fine. You can jump onto some wild tangents. But yeah, finding out stuff about a world I don't know about is very, very. That's my fizzy pop moment at the moment. Is that what you called it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That's really nice. Well, it's nice actually that you've got into the areas that you weren't necessarily excited by, kind of sport and music. I think that's really fantastic. So what one word would you use to describe yourself?
um. Let me think. Atypical. Let's go with that. I don't seem to
Atypical.
fit into
Brilliant.
any particular mold or shape or form. Like I'm a South Wales Valley boy, but I don't conform to any of those stereotypes or like expectations. I am working class, but I've got a very middle class, or upper class life at the moment. I'm a science writer, but I don't conform to any of those stereotypes. I'm a neuroscientist, but I
Yeah.
certainly don't behave like one. I'm technically part of the comedy scene, but not in any way any other comedian tends to do it. So there's no real box I will sit comfortably in, and I kind of like it that way.
Brilliant. And then if you were to, I mean, I've not asked this of anyone, but I'm intrigued to what you would say. But what one word would you use to describe the world?
Um, uh, Unpredictable. It's these all things talk about the
Brilliant.
tides of history, like the arc of the universe, just and no, things repeat itself. But I don't think that's the case. Like all these precedents we have, of how people in large groups work or behave or will or what or will do, they always end up being wrong because like the world is run by people and people are not predictable. I would think.
That's so brilliant. I love that. It's so good. Dean, I love talking to
No
you.
problem, Sid. Thanks for
Honestly,
having
I
me.
talk to you for hours. It's wonderful. The thing that I love about you is just that you've a very calm approach to life. I mean, is that something that you have normally?
Um, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've always been a very sort of laid back, chilled type person
Mm.
in the sense that again, I was a very quiet kid. I had no particular uh, you know anger or passion about stuff, but not necessarily always in a good way. Like I think I was perhaps too unbothered about stuff, too timid. You guys say about that, but I think
Mm.
quite quickly I realised that I've a lot to be thankful for, a lot to be grateful for. And I'm very conscious of that. So I find it, I'm not one to easily anger or get quickly worked up about stuff because I guess I'm very much a big picture person in that, yes, this thing has
Mm.
been inconvenient, but I still have a very close family who I love very much. I still have a good career, which most people would be
Yeah.
really, really happy or really eager to get. I mean,
Yeah.
I tell it, like people ask me a lot, like, how do I get into writing? How did you do it? As well, I've told you my story. There's literally no way you can replicate
Mm.
that because I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and let alone tell anyone else to do it.
Mm.
But I sort of accidentally fell into writing and now have a successful literary career, which countless people strive really hard for and never get.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah. It does.
so I know how lucky I am, and I know how. I mean, it's not like I haven't worked for it, but it's just that countless other people have worked for it too, and they haven't got it, and that is just
Mm.
luck of the draw in that
Mm.
respect. And yeah, so I've earned it, but countless other people have earned similar and don't have it, and that's something I'm constantly aware of, constantly aware of, and I don't want to ever sort of seem ungrateful about that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Dean, thank you. Honestly, thank you for being a guest, and thank you for being so honest. Really love your answers. I really do. And we'll put links in to your books and make reference to them, obviously,
Great stuff.
in the show notes. But honestly, it's seriously, genuinely, thank you so much. Love your books, love your writing, love your thinking. Just wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.